Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 150 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm good, man. You made it to 150.
Can you believe it?
That's amazing.
150.
Yeah.
It doesn't even seem real.
Well, maybe it's not. Maybe we're really not here right now.
Maybe we're in a turtle's dream.
Yeah.
Now, I remember when we hit 150 on True Crime All the Time, but when you put them both together,
Yeah.
we just did what? 169, I think it was.
Something like that.
On TCAT. Now we're at 150 on Unsolved. You know, I'm not a math whiz, but that's like 319 episodes. That's a lot of episodes.
It's a pretty close number.
It's pretty close to being correct.
Correct.
But speaking of TCAT,
Yeah.
episode 169, it's on Jacob Van Winkle. And Gibbs, this wasn't a guy that I was very familiar with at all. He was a despicable human being.
It really was.
I mean, like of the lowest order.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is, because he's still alive. It's definitely an episode that, you know, people are going to be upset by. It's one of those episodes where it wasn't like all of a sudden at age whatever, he decided he was going to do something.
Right.
His entire life was essentially spent drinking, doing drugs, and committing crimes.
Yeah.
Some of them very horrible crimes. And he was able to get out, do them again, get caught, get out, do them again. There's a lot of aspects of that case that really, it made me mad, and I know made you mad as well.
Made me extremely upset.
But it's a good episode. Definitely check that out. Before we get into our Unsolved episode, let's do our Patreon shout outs. We had Keith Batchelor,
Hey, Keith.
Joe Ellen Wilson,
What's going on, Joe Ellen?
Kelly,
Hey, Kelly.
Janice Olson,
What's going on, Janice?
Courtney DiBiasio,
Hey, DiBiasio.
Taylor Hughes,
Hey, Taylor.
Bethany Haswell,
Hey, Bethany.
Lou Ting,
What's going on, Luting?
Emily Cook,
Hey, Emily.
Patience Alexis,
She's got a lot of patience.
Stephanie Kranz,
Hey, Stephanie.
Sarah Holder,
What's going on, Sarah?
Caitlin Rotherham,
Hey, Rotherham.
Cameron,
What's going on, Cameron?
Erica Timmons,
Hey, Erica.
Maria Calaze,
Calazay.
Andrew Harris,
Hey, Andrew.
Courtney Johnson,
Hey, Courtney.
Nicole Reynolds,
Thanks, Nicole.
Allison Roberts,
Hey, Allison.
Olivia Barnes,
Hey, Olivia.
Nicole Smith,
Thanks, Nicole.
and Carla Torriello.
Tolalero.
Very close.
Very close.
Very close. And then we go back into the vault, Gibbs. This week we selected Carolyn Markley.
Hey, Carolyn.
Been with us a long time. We appreciate both the new Patreon support as well as the continued support. We had some great PayPal donations as well. We had Michelle Robinson,
Wow, thanks, Michelle.
Jordan Anusowitz,
Hey, Jordan.
Pauline Timms,
Thanks, Pauline.
and Kyla Acker.
Thanks, Kyla.
So thank you all very much. All right, buddy. We can't waste any time.
No.
This is a jam-packed episode. Are you ready for milestone episode number 150 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast?
Yeah, because this is a really good one.
It is a really good one. We're talking about the 1975 unsolved murder of Martha Moxley. This is a very well-known unsolved murder, and it's one that I've been fascinated with for a long time. I think many people have. You know, a lot of the notoriety is caused by the suspicions that fell onto members of the famous Kennedy clan. So I think anytime you're talking about the Kennedys, one of the most famous families in U.S. history,
Right,
you could argue,
Absolutely.
there's going to be a lot of fascination. You know, this is a murder that happened almost 45 years ago. And during that time, there have been a number of twists and turns in the case. It's one of those cases that draws a lot of interest online, which results in an enormous amount of speculation. And the majority of that attention over the years has centered on one man. This is also a case where the local police would take a lot of heat over the years. You know, you and I, probably a month ago or so, did another unsolved case
Right.
around the Greenwich, Connecticut area. The same thing happened there.
Absolutely.
Police took a lot of heat, and we did talk briefly, I think about the
We did.
Martha Moxley case. In this one, people were suspicious very early on that family influence and money were helping to keep Martha's murderer out of jail.
Yeah, you got the whole relation to the Kennedys.
Yeah, you have that. And you also have, as we'll talk about, the Skakel family, which was very wealthy in their own right, obviously related to the Kennedys, but, very well off. Let's start out talking about Martha. Martha Elizabeth Moxley was born on August 16th, 1960 in California to John and Dorothy Moxley. The Moxleys had a 2-year-old son named John at the time that Martha was born. In 1974, the Moxleys moved to the swanky area of Greenwich, Connecticut, named Bellhaven. We're talking about one of the wealthiest areas in the United States.
Very opulent.
Very opulent. And I love when you use that word. I know you love that word.
It's one of the few words I know that are that long.
And you're very steeped in opulence yourself.
Very steep.
This is a very exclusive area. And it's really just a little over 30 miles or so from New York City. So there's a lot of rich people that live there that work in the city. John Moxley worked in Manhattan at an accounting firm while Dorothy stayed home to raise the children. Gibbs, it really seemed like a good family unit. This was a family that had money. They belonged to a country club. They lived in this very upscale, gated community. But at the same time, I really got the sense that this was a tight-knit, close family. And a lot of times those other things don't result in that type of really good family life. Martha was very popular at her new high school. After moving, she was pretty. She had long blonde hair. She was friendly. She was very athletic. She was also extremely intelligent, receiving straight A's in high school. She was artistic. She loved to draw, and she loved listening to Elton John, as do I.
Little Crocodile Rock.
I'm a big Elton John fan. I think the key thing here in talking about the life of Martha Moxley is that, number one, she was a good person. But then number two, her life was really just starting. She had everything going for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she had her entire life ahead of her.
The world was her oyster.
Well put. The Moxleys lived diagonally across the street from the Skakel family, who, as we mentioned, had some very famous family ties. Rushton Skakel, the father, was the brother of Ethel Kennedy, who was the widow of Robert F. Kennedy. Robert was a senator and the attorney general who was assassinated in 1968 while he was running for president. He was the brother of John F. Kennedy, the 35th president of the United States, who was assassinated in 1963. I know that's a little bit of a history lesson, and I'm sure most people already know it. But I say it anyway because it's very important in this case. To me, it's important because of those names. I mean, when you talk about John F. Kennedy, when you talk about Robert F. Kennedy, it doesn't get a whole lot bigger when you think of recognizable names in the 1960s. Was there anybody that didn't know who those people were?
Royalty, man.
They really were like American royalty. I mean, you think about the whole Camelot idea and all of that. And I think because their lives were ended so early by assassination, their lives even took on like a mythical type of horror too. Rushton Skakel was a widow. His wife Anne died from cancer in 1973. Rushton and Anne had 7 children, but it's really their 2 sons, Thomas and Michael, that would become central to this case. In 1975, when the murder occurred, Thomas was 17 and Michael was 15. The Skakels also at the time had a live-in tutor, a 24-year-old man named Kenneth Littleton. So all of that brings us to October 30th, 1975, the day before Halloween. Just kind of want to set the tone for that time frame. Gerald Ford was president of the United States, and the Eagles' Lying Eyes was a top 10 song.
Really?
Yeah.
You want to sing it?
No.
Okay.
Just wanted to throw that out there. It was that night, the 30th in Greenwich, that Martha went out with some friends on what was in that area called Mischief Night. I'd never heard of it.
Never heard of it either.
Maybe they have it in a lot of different places. Maybe this is more of a Greenwich, Connecticut thing. I'm not really sure. I normally thought about Halloween night being the time that you played your pranks and you did your egging and your stuff like that. But apparently in this little enclave, and this was like a gated community,
right?
The kids would get together the night before. They would go out, play pranks, throw eggs, shaving cream, toilet paper, soap windows, play ding dong ditch, all that.
But probably the really good eggs and the really good toilet paper.
Well, they were probably organic.
Yeah. The toilet paper was the kind that, was more than one ply.
The extra super soft Charmin.
Yeah.
I know you're familiar with all of those things. You probably did them growing up. You might have done some of it last week. I don't know.
Who told you?
I have my sources.
All right. It was fun.
The problem is Martha Moxley never made it home that night. Martha's mother, Dorothy, became very worried, and she started calling around the neighborhood looking for her. Martha's brother, John, got in his car, drove around the neighborhood trying to find her as well. Martha's body was discovered around noon the next day, face down under a tree in her own backyard. So police are on scene, and I think very quickly they determined that Martha had been bludgeoned to death with a 6-iron golf club. The head of the golf club was found about 200 feet from the house, and the shaft was broken into pieces, and it was pretty clear to authorities that Martha had been stabbed a number of times with the broken club shaft. And I don't know if Gibbs, if you've ever seen a club shaft break, one of the old kind of stainless steel club shafts. When it happens, it is like a super jagged but sharp piece of steel. I mean, it's very dangerous.
Extremely dangerous.
It would later be determined that she was stabbed 5 times. And one of the stab wounds was to her neck. So somebody literally shoved this jagged, broken piece of golf club shaft into her neck.
Vicious.
She was found with her pants and underwear down around her ankles. But it was revealed later that there was no sign of any type of sexual assault. And the autopsy is really important in this case, especially when it comes to the determination of Martha's time of death. It was a big window. They really could only put it at sometime between 9:30 p.m. on the 30th to 5:30 a.m. on the 31st. That's an 8-hour window.
A big window.
That's very big. Now, later on, police and prosecutors would say that it was somewhere close to 10 p.m. on the night of the 30th. That would end up being not very long at all after the last time that she was seen. This would come later from a forensic pathologist at trial. And it was also backed up from interviews with neighbors who said they heard some noises around that time. There was a bunch of neighbors that also heard dogs barking around that same time. So it was kind of backing up, I think, what would later come out from the forensics. But they just didn't have it in 1975.
Right.
In 1975, well, they're trying to narrow down a suspect. They've got an 8-hour window of time. That makes it very difficult.
Oh, very, very tough.
Police began their investigation into Martha's murder. And Gibbs, this was the first murder in the upscale town of Greenwich in 30 years. And I think we actually mentioned that on the Unsolved episode that we did because it came after the murder of Martha Moxley. The day that Martha's body was found, police learned that she had been at the Skakel home the night before with a couple of her friends. This was the night where they were going out and doing this, what they called mischief night. It was determined that she got there around 9 p.m. and she listened to some music in the family car with Michael Skakel. He's the 15-year-old. At this point in time, the same age as Martha. Michael's brother, Tommy, the 17-year-old, arrived around 9:15. And it was Tommy Skakel that would be the last person to see Martha that night. And he told police that when he saw her as she was leaving, she was headed towards her house. Police interviewed Martha's girlfriends who were with her that night, and they said that Tommy and Martha were flirting, they were kissing when the two girls left the Skakel home.
So we got a little romance kind of thing happening.
We do. And it's going to be big in this case. Rushton Skakel allowed police to search their home. And it was during this search that they discovered that the 6-iron they believed to be the murder weapon belonged to the Skakels.
So now we know where the weapon came from.
Yeah, it turned out to be part of a set of expensive golf clubs that had belonged to Rushton's wife, Ann. That's not good.
No.
If you're a member of the Skakel home, I think very quickly, police turned their attention to the Skakel kids, Tommy and Michael. And police had learned that Michael had a crush on Martha. They also turned their attention to this tutor, this 24-year-old named Kenneth Littleton. Rushton was out of town the night of October 30th, and it was Kenneth, the tutor, who was in charge of the kids. So he was a tutor / babysitter.
Yeah, makes sense.
Is the way that I understood it. But I really think the initial focus of police was on Tommy. Number one, he was the oldest of the two kids. He was 17, but he was the last person to see Martha alive. Add on top of that, the fact that police learned that they had been fooling around a little bit, very close to the time that they believed, she likely died. But this was a very strange situation. Rushton was a prominent figure in the community. His father, George, had been a multi-millionaire. He built one of the largest privately held companies in the United States. Rushton had quite a bit of money after taking over as the head of the company. The other thing that was really prominent in the research was that a lot of the police officers in this area, they moonlighted. They made extra money at the Skakel residence.
Oh, as security, huh?
Working as security. And I think this fact is one of those that later kind of fueled some of the speculation that police maybe weren't as interested in looking too deeply at Michael and Thomas. It also appears that the family's attorney helped shut down much of the early investigation into Tommy Skakel. Obviously, they had the money, right? They had the means to hire whatever attorney they wanted.
Yeah.
They would have probably hired him very early on. And that attorney said, nope, you can't do this. You can't do that. You can't talk to him about this.
Yep. Well, using the advice I always say, get an attorney.
Yeah.
No matter what side of the fence
if you
you're
can
on.
afford one, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt when you have millions of dollars at your disposal.
Sure.
Now, if you're a kid from the other side of the tracks and your family has no money, what are you left to do? You haven't been charged with anything. You can't be provided an attorney.
You're kind of screwed.
You're either savvy enough to know not to say anything.
Right. Sit there and zip it.
Or your parents know enough to tell you not to say anything. But you don't have that attorney as the buffer,
right,
not letting you do anything that you shouldn't be doing. By December of that year, police had interviewed over 250 people regarding Martha's murder.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
It's also, a 3-month period of time, so they were working hard on it. They found out that Michael had an alibi, and his alibi was that he left his house at 9:30 with his older brothers and a cousin and was miles away at this cousin's house. at 10 p.m. watching Monty Python and smoking marijuana, and he didn't get back home until 11. Gibby, that sounds to me like probably a typical night for you back in 1975. I just imagine that's probably what you were doing as well.
Monty Python, man. That was a good little
Smoking
flick.
marijuana.
All that was a good little time back in the day.
Well, you had just returned from Vietnam, so not sure what else you would have been doing in 1975.
Exactly.
You had done your 2 tours.
I did.
You were back home. By January of 1976, Rushton had completely cut off all access by police to the family. My assumption is, the heat was there. They were looking hard at Tommy especially, maybe Michael as well. And the dad said, you know what? No, we're done. We're not talking to you. We're not giving you any added fuel for your speculation fire. Later that year, Kenneth Singleton took a polygraph test. Now, I've seen varying reports on this. I've seen that he failed it, and I've seen that he passed it. So I'm not really sure which one it is, because it's been reported both ways.
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because the case of Martha Moxley's murder went cold. I mean, really, besides finding out that the murder weapon came from the Skakel household, police didn't have anything else. They never found any physical evidence linking anyone from the Skakel family to the murder. And really, once the family stopped cooperating, that would have made it extremely tough for police to really do anything when it came to the family. They just didn't have anything. So a couple of years went by. In 1978, Michael Skakel led police on a high-speed chase. He was drunk, and it ultimately led him to being sent to a private school in Maine for teens with substance abuse problems. Now, most of us would do jail time for something like that.
Because we don't have the money to fight it.
Right. You can't get drunk, get in your car, and not pull over for police and go on a high-speed chase.
Did you ever go on a high-speed chase?
No, I've driven at high speeds. I've never tried to run away from the police.
Yeah. Never crossed the border, nothing like that? State line?
No.
Okay.
Do they have to stop at that point?
Yeah. They're not.
And how do you know that?
They're not going to pursue you from Ohio into Indiana. No.
And how do you know that?
I'm just saying they're not going to.
From television or from real life?
Absolutely.
But here's what I thought was interesting about this part. Skakel didn't do any jail time, right? He gets sent to this private school because his family was able to work out a deal. He gets sent to the school to be treated for his addiction, and the state drops the charges. That's the deal. That's a pretty good deal.
It is a good deal.
For drunk driving and trying to evade police in a high-speed chase.
Yeah. Good attorneys and good connections.
That is true.
Can make things happen.
That's true. And I think that's a big part of the case. And it's why, a lot of people are fascinated, right? You have the Kennedys, you have the Skakels who have a lot of money in their own right. They have the connections. They have the means. Michael was in and out of rehab centers for really the next decade. I mean, we're talking about a long period of time that he struggled with substance abuse. And then he finally did kick his bad habits, his substance abuse problems. He graduated from college in 1993 and later got married and moved with his wife to Massachusetts. Along the way, he had jobs. He also spent time working on the re-election campaigns of various Kennedy family members. He was kind of involved in some of these big high-profile campaigns in one way or the other.
Yeah, probably got paid pretty decent for it.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I don't know that money was ever a problem for him, but
that's true.
Now, there were a number of books written about this case over the years. The famous Dominic Dunn wrote a book in 1993 about the case called A Season in Purgatory that many people gives credit for helping to revive interest in Martha's case. I mean, really, you're talking about almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Going by. The case had somewhat been forgotten about. And then you have a guy like Dunn write a book. And it kind of got people talking again, thinking.
Revitalize it.
Yeah, about this case. Then in 1998, Mark Furman.
Who?
Yeah, Mark Furman from the O.J. Simpson case, he wrote a book on the Martha Moxley murder. It was called Murder in Greenwich, Who Killed Martha Moxley. I think they even made that one into a movie.
Yeah.
Maybe a TV movie.
Probably.
But after writing his book in 93, Dunn never gave up on the case. And in the late 90s, he received some additional information that cast even more suspicion on Michael Skakel. And this was so strange because it was Michael's dad, Rushton, who hired a team of private investigators in the hope that these investigators would clear both of his sons' names in any involvement in Martha's murder.
Right.
He's got the money.
Sure he does.
Hell, I'll just hire a bunch of investigators. They can do their own investigation, come back with their findings and say, we've looked into everything. There's no way that Michael and or Tommy were involved in any way. Instead, what happened was, after spending 3 years investigating the case, interviewing all kinds of people, including the family members, right? Police don't have access to the family members, but these private investigators do. What they reportedly uncovered was that Michael Skakel had climbed a tree on the Moxley family grounds and masturbated in the tree the night that Martha died.
Okay.
So this came out. This was revealed. Strange.
It's very strange.
The other thing they found out was that Michael had a big crush on Martha.
So he's up in Martha's family tree,
Mm-hmm.
masturbating, maybe looking over her window or something like that.
Yep. It doesn't make you look good.
No.
Now, it also doesn't mean you killed anybody, but it doesn't make you look good. It's not it's not something that you would tell all your friends about. It's not something you'd want everybody to know.
Should we talk about how risky it is? The injury that you could cause yourself by masturbating up in a tree? Slippage, falling, hurting yourself.
Splinters. Barkage. Is that a word? Barkage?
Probably for you.
You can get some barkage on you.
You might. And then just the fact that random squirrels coming by. I don't know.
Yeah. Nuts. I mean, there's all kinds of factors that play into it. But there was something else that came out of this investigation. And it was a revelation by Tommy Skakel that he told investigators he had an intimate encounter with Martha Moxley that night. And he put it sometime between 9:30 and 9:55. Okay, that's not huge. But when he got into the details, he said that he unbuttoned her jeans and he pulled them down. Now, I don't know how much further than that it went.
Right.
But that's very interesting.
Sure it is.
When you think about how Martha's body was found with her clothes pretty much in that same exact way. So like I mentioned, the report compiled by these private investigators, it didn't make Michael Skakel look good at all. Didn't really, make Tommy look that great either. But I think it really kind of made Michael look worse.
Yeah. They weren't helping the cause.
No, and it's obviously not what Rushton Skakel had hoped would come from this very long investigation, something that I'm sure he paid big bucks for. A team of investigators working for 3 years, that would have cost quite a bit of money.
Absolutely.
So I think Gibbs, he had hoped to take this report, maybe show it to police and say, hey, here, this is what we did.
Independent finding.
Right. Independent finding. Use this. Instead, I think he took it and he put it in a drawer and he said, I'm not doing nothing with this bad boy.
I would have burnt that.
Because it's not helping our cause. The problem is a news reporter got a hold of it, a copy of this, and it made its way into the hands of Dominic Dunn and was later passed on to Mark Furman for his book. Dunn later published an article in Vanity Fair detailing out some of this information that was uncovered. CNN later published an excerpt from the report that read, Michael at the time was plagued with serious emotional problems, living by many accounts a reckless and drug-fueled existence. What gradually emerged from that point forward was a portrait of a deeply and somewhat enigmatically troubled young man. In this light, and during the course of Sutton Associates' investigation, serious questions and unresolved issues have been raised about Michael and the murder of Martha Moxley. At the very least, it is fair to say that Michael Skakel has, for whatever reasons, often acted out in ways certain to arouse suspicion. Reportedly, Michael once even confessed to the murder of Martha Moxley in a therapy session while a patient at the Elin Treatment Center. This was the place that he went to
Right.
after, they struck up this deal with the police. Now, the report says he later recanted, but this is huge. And obviously just a big part of why his dad or any of the family would never want this report really to see the light of day.
That would be so damaging.
To your point, I'm not sure why he didn't burn the damn thing.
Yeah. But I can see what they're saying, he's got this obsession with her. He's up in the tree masturbating. Maybe he sees his brother getting a little side action with the girl that he loves, goes into a rage, comes down the tree after his brother leaves, and you give me the same thing you gave him. If not, I'm going to take it anyway, and yanks her pants down and does the bad things that happen to her.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And we'll see it later on when we get into the trial of Michael Skakel. That's pretty much what the prosecution believes happened. But you can see how this report would be damaging.
Yeah.
And it's going to play a big role in some of the future legal issues of Michael Skakel. But I think about it, and I think if not for this report, is there as much renewed interest in the case as it turns out there is? Because, like I said, some of these books written really kind of spurred everybody on to not open the case back up, but really try to dig back into the case. And some of this information that was in the report was in some of these books. In 1998, so we're talking 23 years after Martha's murder, prosecutors announced that a one-judge grand jury had been appointed to investigate the murder. So a single judge, kind of acting as a grand jury, as opposed to having 12 people or however many people on a grand jury hear the testimony. They're just going to have a judge
That was appointed.
Yeah. So you have people coming in to testify. One person that testified before the grand jury was the former Skakel tutor, Kenneth Singleton. But there was a catch. He would only testify if he was granted immunity.
Oh.
And I think a lot of people have speculated on what that means. Normally when you're asking for immunity, it's because you're about ready to say something that's going to incriminate you.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that by saying that, it can't be held against you.
Yeah, I want my get out of jail free card.
But probably the most damaging testimony came from some people who had been at the Center for Teens with substance abuse problems with Michael Skakel back in the late 70s. We mentioned it, right? It was detailed out in the report that people said he admitted to killing Martha Moxley at this center.
Right.
One man named Gregory Coleman testified that Michael admitted to him that he murdered Martha Moxley and said that he would get away with it because he was a Kennedy.
Bold.
Now, Coleman later admitted that he was high on heroin when he testified before the grand jury.
Oh. Is that after he got the envelope of cash?
Maybe. I don't know. And he was later found dead from a drug overdose in August of 2001.
Conveniently.
Maybe. Mm-hmm. But you have to weigh all these factors, right? What does that testimony mean if the guy was high on heroin? Does it mean he's telling the truth? Does it mean he's not? Should it be discounted? Should it be thrown out?
I think it'd be discounted if he was truly high. You're going to discount it down.
Yeah, I think he was truly high. I think he was smacked out of his gourd on heroin.
Yeah. So
he admitted it.
So I think at that point you have to discount it.
And I think it was backed up by the fact that he died of a drug overdose later on. In July 1999, Kenneth Singleton was admitted to the hospital for what was described as self-inflicted stab wounds. This is the Tudor guy.
Yeah.
He kind of keeps jumping into this case back and forth. This is the guy that asked for immunity. And now all of a sudden he's harmed himself and he's in the hospital. Strange. Now, I don't have information on everybody that testified before the grand jury. And even if we did, we wouldn't have time to detail it all out. But it lasted for about a year and a half, this grand jury investigation. It wrapped up in December of 1999. And what resulted from it was an arrest warrant being issued the very next month for Michael Skakel. So all of the testimony in this grand jury was enough for this judge to say Michael Skakel should stand trial for the murder of Martha Moxley. He surrendered to police on January 19th, 2000, and was charged with the murder of Martha Moxley. But I found this very interesting. Because Michael was only 15 at the time of the murder, he was actually charged as a juvenile.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they go back in time and say, at the time of the crime, this is what we would have done.
Yeah.
So,
even though, at this point he's 39, 40 years old.
Yeah.
When the crime was committed, he was only 15. So he's charged as a juvenile.
But I mean, I guess if there's a silver lining, it sounds strange to say that, but if you are really guilty, I guess you prefer that.
Well, you'd prefer it as opposed to being charged as an adult. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Gibbs, later on, a juvenile court judge would change this and order Michael Skakel to be tried as an adult. And this was a big deal because, in 1975, going back to what was on the books at that point in time, if he was convicted of her murder,
right,
and tried as a juvenile, the most he could have gotten was like 4 years.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And being tried as an adult, that could be, up to life. I mean, you're talking about a dramatic difference.
If that was the case, you'd almost want to say as a defense attorney, maybe we go ahead and strike a deal.
Plead guilty as I just don't think they just wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
And one of the things I read was that in part they said, okay, if we try and convict this guy as a juvenile, where the hell are we going to send him? We can't send him to a juvenile facility.
No.
With a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds. Can't send this 40-year-old guy or however old he's going to be.
Put him on house arrest, probably.
So it just didn't make any sense. But this is something that his defense team argued for quite a long time. There were appeals, but they ultimately lost. The trial of Michael Skakel for the murder of Martha Moxley began in May 2002. So this was well over 2 years after he was charged. In reading a lot of different articles from legal pundits at the time, they were not optimistic about the prosecution's chances of getting a conviction. They just didn't think that there was enough evidence against this guy.
But they are taking on a very powerful family.
And he had a very prominent, high-priced attorney, as you would expect. So the prosecution came out and said that pretty much like what you said earlier, Michael Skakel murdered Martha with this 6-iron in a jealous rage after seeing Martha and his brother Tommy together. They painted him as a troubled kid, mixed up with drugs. But like I said, they had very little in the way of evidence. They had no forensics. They really had no science tying him to the murder. And that was something that, by that point in time, many people had become accustomed to seeing in those types of cases, right? A lot of juries wanted to see, okay, what's this forensic / scientific evidence that proves he's guilty?
Right.
I mean, it's the whole CSI's out by that point. You have all the shows that are, within an hour telling you this is why the person is guilty. And a lot of people watched them and a lot of juries wanted to see that.
Right.
Well, the prosecution didn't have it.
No, wasn't there.
What they had were 12 witnesses who testified that Michael Skakel had told them that he was responsible for Martha's murder. Prosecutors were allowed to read for the jury the grand jury testimony of Gregory Coleman, the guy that we talked about, who had testified while he was on heroin.
Right.
And later overdosed. So he was dead. He could not testify at this trial, but they were allowed to read his testimony. One of the individuals that testified was Kenneth Littleton. And I didn't mention this during the grand jury part, but really his testimony offered very little in the way of damaging evidence. I'm not really even sure why he felt he needed the immunity.
Yeah, it sounds strange after you realize what he testified.
Right. It's not like he came out with some big bombshell that implicated anyone, including himself. What he basically testified to was that from 9 to 11 p.m. on the 30th, he was in the Skakel residence watching the movie The French Connection. Good movie.
Sure.
Gene Hackman, car chases. I think what was important in his testimony is that he said Tommy came in and joined him around 10 p.m. He said he never met or even had ever seen Martha Moxley before, in that he didn't overhear any of the Skakel boys saying anything about her murder. This is essentially what he testified to. It's not really much of anything.
Well, I mean, it's helping to close a timeline.
And if anything, it's helping Tommy.
Right.
Right? Because he's essentially somewhat giving Tommy an alibi for a certain period of time. The prosecution also pointed out a number of inconsistencies in the statements that Michael had made over the past 27 years. They definitely challenged Michael's alibi, pointing out to the jury that it was mainly, or pretty much all, provided by family members. There was no outside, corroboration of that. And they had a witness named Andrea Renna, who was a close friend back in 1975 of Michael's sister. And she told the jury that Michael didn't get in the car with his brother and his cousin to make the drive over to the cousin's house. So she essentially is blowing up his alibi.
Yeah.
Saying, I was there. I saw the car leave. He didn't get in. He stayed behind.
What he said didn't happen.
Yes. That had to be pretty damaging. Now, Michael didn't testify at his trial, but prosecutors were able to produce a tape of him and play it for the jury. So on this tape, Gibbs, he's talking to a writer about a possible book, I think. And he says on the tape that he walked over to the Moxley house late on the night of the 30th. He was being bold. This is what he told the guy. He was thinking that Martha liked him and he was going to try to get a kiss from her. He threw rocks at her window to get her attention. When that failed, she didn't come to the window. He climbed the tree, ended up masturbating, and then went home.
Masturbate in the tree, then go home.
The old, like that's done all the time. Now, he doesn't say he killed her on this tape, but just like, what came out in the investigator's report, he does admit to doing this strange thing, right? Climbing, up her tree, masturbating. It's odd. And I guarantee you 12 members of a jury would think that's strange.
Yeah.
Now, does it mean that you killed Martha? No.
No. Just means you like to masturbate up in a tree.
That's all it means. Maybe.
So,
but to a jury, you don't know, right? That's the problem. You don't know what a jury will make of any one piece of evidence or different things that are said.
But back then, I think it probably was weird enough that they thought you went over there, you couldn't get her attention, you went up in the tree, you masturbated.
You just like to say masturbated, don't you?
Masturbated.
He's masturbating.
Yeah. Because he was, I would think in the jury's eyes, after hearing that he was so fascinated by her,
or frustrated, because you could make that connection as well, possibly.
True. Yeah. You could say, hey, I was frustrated because I wasn't able to be with her.
And fascination plus frustration sometimes ends in
masturbation.
Well, ends in bad things.
Yeah.
Worse than that.
Yes.
Not saying that's bad, but I do think it's something that could have been and maybe was powerful to the jury, especially the fact that it contradicted somewhat his alibi, right? That he used back in 1975. Remember, his alibi said he was watching Monty Python
Right.
at 10 o'clock. On the tape, he says he's throwing rocks and masturbating in a tree at 10 o'clock. Well, it can't be both.
No.
So even if they didn't think the tree thing was all that damning or strange or anything like that,
Right.
the fact that it contradicted his alibi was probably the biggest thing.
Sure. It's the inconsistencies that he's laying out there.
The trial ended on June 7th when the jury convicted Michael Skakel of murdering Martha Moxley, and he was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison.
Typical sentence for something like that.
Yep. Now, his defense attorneys began appealing, but, at first they really had no luck. In early 2004, the Connecticut Supreme Court declined to hear the case, and the U.S. Supreme Court denied to hear it as well. Those are two biggies.
That's huge.
And you've lost both. In 2007, Michael tried to get a new trial based on the testimony of Gitano Bryant, a classmate of Michael's, who also happens to be the cousin of NBA legend Kobe Bryant.
Really?
Who just recently died in that helicopter accident, tragic, along with his daughter. Bryant said that two men that he knew were with him in the ritzy neighborhood the night of the 30th.
Right.
These two men, they picked up the golf club from Michael Skakel's yard, and they said that they were going to attack a girl, quote, caveman style.
Caveman style.
Which to me can only mean one thing.
Yeah.
If you say that, it means you're going to hit someone over the head.
Drag them away.
Because in all the cartoons that I watched as a kid, that's what cavemen did.
Captain Caveman.
They hit people in the head with clubs.
Yeah.
Now, Bryant said he didn't want to have anything to do with it, and he left. But then he said he later learned about Martha's murder. However, he kept quiet, silent for 25 years with this information.
It's a long time to be quiet about something.
About something that big, but the court denied a new trial based on this information from Bryant. A judge said that he found it very unlikely that 3 African American males would have gone unnoticed in that neighborhood. Now, you can think that's somewhat racist. You can also see some logic in it.
Sure.
Because I don't have the demographics of this neighborhood in 1975.
Right.
But my assumption is it was pretty white.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's a pretty safe assumption to make. And I think that's what the judge is saying. He's saying that there's nobody else that has ever come forward and said that they saw 3 or 2 African American males in walking around in the neighborhood. The police never talked to these individuals. I think that's what he's basing his decision on. But Skakel's attorneys didn't stop. In 2010, they filed an appeal based on ineffective assistance of counsel. That's pretty normal, right? You see that in a lot of cases. Michael Skakel spent more than 10 years in prison before a Connecticut judge vacated his conviction in October 2013. The judge ordered a new trial after finding that his defense counsel had been extremely ineffective. The judge said there were numerous ways in which Skakel's defense attorney was ineffective, but he pointed to 3 in particular. Number 1 was that the defense attorney didn't point out Michael's brother Thomas as a possible suspect. Never brought it up.
Right.
You could make the assumption that that's because he was being paid by the Skakel family, and maybe that's not something that he wanted to do.
Or he was told not to.
Or he was told not to do it. But the judge found that, hey, you're not doing the right thing by your client. The second was that the attorney didn't call a psychologist who apparently was at Michael's cousin's house on the night of the murder, who could have backed up his alibi, saying, hey, I was there, Michael was there. He never called him to the stand. And then the third was that his defense attorney didn't call any of the three witnesses who were said to have been able to refute the testimony of Gregory Coleman. Gregory was the guy that was on heroin.
Yeah.
Who testified that Michael Skakel told him he killed Martha Moxley. The judge pretty much said his attorney was incompetent during this trial.
It's a big claim.
Yeah. Because you see appeals raised on that very often. But I don't think it's that often that they're won based on ineffective counsel.
Yeah. So it's an effort that's made to get it in front of the appeals court.
Yeah, I think it's a defense attorney taking a shot, right? What do you have to lose by saying that your client's former counsel was ineffective?
Yeah.
I don't think it's that you're going to win a very high percentage of the time, but if you're not taking the shot, you're being ineffective, right?
Sure,
You're not doing right by your client. So Michael Skakel posted a $1.2 million bail and was released after 10 years.
Yeah.
Walked out of jail. Now, he did have to wear a GPS monitoring device, something that we know you know a lot about, Gibbs.
They're a lot of fun.
He was also ordered not to leave the state of Connecticut and to have no contact with the Moxley family. All very reasonable.
And why would he have any contact with the Moxley family?
I've seen some strange things. I've seen people taunt family members of victims.
That's true.
Doesn't make sense, but I've seen it happen. Now, as you can imagine, the state wasn't very happy, right? The state doesn't like to lose. They don't like to have their convictions vacated. So they appealed, but it took 3 years for the Connecticut Supreme Court to make a ruling. When they did, they rejected the lower court's ruling by a vote of 4-3. So essentially, conviction back on.
Right.
Michael Skakel is going to have to go back to prison.
Got your cell warmed up for you.
But in 2017, Gibbs, a very strange thing happened. Skakel's attorney asked the Supreme Court to reconsider their decision. I think, again, a move that is often tried, but very seldom worked.
Right.
Most courts, once they have ruled, they're not real keen on a redo.
Yeah,
They've already ruled on it once.
It's like, hey, I know you voted against this, but
pretty please, can you reconsider?
Yeah, just go back and look at it one more time.
Especially when, you're essentially ruling on the same evidence. It's not like there's some new bombshell that's come forward, but this time they did. And what I found very interesting about it is that in the year since they made their decision, the makeup of the court had changed, right? So a justice had retired.
Sure.
A new justice had come on. Now, keep in mind this entire time, right? Years have gone by. Michael's still free.
Yeah.
He's out. He's not in prison. And things, as we know, they don't move very quickly through the courts. So the state wants to send him back to prison, but the court won't allow it. They're going to allow him to be free until they make a redecision, I guess you would call it. And in 2018, they did. The Connecticut Supreme Court vacated his conviction by the same vote, 4-3. This time, just the other way around. And that's why I think it was very important to talk about the change up, right, in the justices. Because obviously, that had to have played a very big role the second time around.
Oh, huge.
The state petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to review the decision, but it was denied in early 2019. So you think about a case that goes all the way back to 1975. There was activity just last year, going on in this case. There's still some activity today. The real question now is whether or not the state of Connecticut will retry Michael Skakel. Because as of now, his conviction has been vacated.
Right.
They have the option, but so far they haven't pursued it. And I think they have some big problems. If they were to decide to do it, this is a case that, like I said, is now almost 45 years old. Some of the witnesses have died. It's been reported that the case files are scattered all over Connecticut. But to me, here's the big one. If this were to go to trial again, Skakel's defense team, they would be, in my opinion, at such an advantage this time around because they would be able to correct all the mistakes
absolutely
made by his previous attorneys. Witnesses that weren't called would be called. They'll have the ability to really craft a defense against all of the known evidence that the state would throw at them. Because to my knowledge, the state doesn't have anything new, right? It's all out there.
Right.
So they could spend all the time in the world figuring out how to combat all of these different pieces that the state's going to throw at them.
But if it was a jury trial, it'd be difficult because everybody knows this case.
Yeah, I mean, they would have a much harder time in 2020 finding jurors that are truly impartial. Because I think, like you said, a lot of people know about this case, and I think a lot of people have their opinions. And many are probably entrenched in those opinions,
sure,
one way or another, whether they believe Michael Skakel is guilty or not. But to me, the evidence was pretty thin the first time around. I think it would be very tough to get a conviction a second time.
I agree with you.
Unless they've got something new up their sleeve using the same evidence, because there's witnesses you're not going to be able to call because they've died.
So at this point, how much time did he serve?
A little over 10 years, I think.
Okay.
And then a period of time, I don't know if you call it house arrest, but
right,
he wasn't confined to the house, I don't think.
And it normally carries 20 to life, so.
Yeah, I mean, they may make the decision that, okay, if he committed it, he was 15 years old.
Yeah.
He did 10 years. The chances of us winning are much lower than they were the first time around. It's not worth it. And I kind of feel like that's where they're at, where they probably would have already said, okay, we're going after you.
Or would it be worth their while, or you think they've already thought it through about the one plea, the
Alford?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that might be their best bet. And, you know, as we've seen with a lot of cases, it's kind of hard to turn down the Alford plea.
Right.
Now, Michael Skakel might do it.
He's got the money.
He's got the money. He's got a lot of things on his side this time around. He might say, you know what? I'm not doing it. Bring it on, because there's no way that you can win.
Right.
I don't know. But for most people, it's pretty hard to turn down the Alford plea because it kind of guarantees you that you're not going back to jail.
Yeah. And if you don't have to worry about having that guilty.
Yeah, the stigma.
Right.
I mean, does he care? He's got a bunch of money.
Right.
I assume.
He's not going to care.
But the question remains, you know, if it wasn't Michael Skakel, because, you know, as of this point, he's not guilty of her murder. Who killed Martha Moxley? I have no idea. I really don't. I mean, there are a number of suspects and have been over the years. Obviously, there's Michael, who we've talked a lot about. There was his brother, Tommy. We mentioned it. He was the last person known to have been with Martha. And he also made some incriminating statements. And he was a guy that really had very little in the way of an alibi. There was the live-in tutor who kind of did provide Tommy's alibi, said that he was watching a movie around 10, which is important because that's when the state believes that Martha was murdered. There are some reports out there that the tutor has said that he left the house for a short period around that time.
Okay.
That came out sometime later. I don't know when exactly. Now, he says he just went outside, I think, to check on a noise, and then he went right back in. But who knows?
Could it have been more than one person?
Oh, absolutely. I think that possibility always exists.
Like the brothers, or the brothers and the tutor.
Yeah, no, I think a combination of the three.
Yeah.
And then you have to also include the fact that it could be none of them and somebody completely off the radar. We've seen that in cases.
Yeah.
We've seen that in cases where people have been convicted of a crime. Later, it's determined that they didn't commit it, and here's who did, and that person wasn't on police radar at all for years and years and years. So I think all of it is part of what makes this case so mysterious. You have the Kennedy connection to the case, which makes it obviously very high profile. One of the most famous families in America. A lot of people have asked the question, were police stonewalled in their efforts by the family's wealth and resources? Some people have accused them of backing off because of the family's name recognition. They just didn't want to take them on.
I believe that.
I believe it's a possibility for sure.
Yeah.
One thing is for certain, right? You feel horrible for Martha's family. Based on everything you read, she was a great kid.
Yeah, man.
And probably would have set the world on fire as an adult. Like we mentioned up front, she had everything going for her. She had a great family. The family had money. She would have gone on to go to probably an Ivy League school. She was an outstanding student. Who knows what she would have done with her life?
Whatever, would have been probably amazing.
Yeah. Her dad, John Moxley, died in 1988, essentially while the case was still cold. Martha's mother, Dorothy, and her brother, John, they've had to go through all of this back and forth of the trials. He's convicted. He's guilty. Nope. It's vacated. He's innocent.
Right.
I think that would be so extremely difficult to be elated at one point thinking, okay, the person that killed my daughter is finally going to be held responsible. They're going to have to pay for what they did. Then years later, you're watching as this person that you believe killed your daughter is let out.
It'd be rough.
Very rough.
Because I don't have her no more. There's no door she's going to come popping out like you just did from that prison.
No. And her mom's almost 90 years old. I think she's 87 or 88.
Yeah.
And to have to go through all of this, that would be very rough.
Definitely tough.
We talk about it a lot, but for me, parents dying, never knowing for sure exactly what happened to their child. Now, I believe from the articles that I read that she's pretty firmly convinced that it was Michael Skakel that killed her daughter, and none of the appeals, the overturning of the convictions, any of that, I don't think any of that's changed her mind, is from what I could tell.
She's content with what she knows.
Yes. And I don't think she's wavered from that.
Right.
But in the eyes of the law, he's not guilty at this point in time of killing Martha.
I guess the one thing she has is he did have to spend some time in prison.
Yeah, he did spend over 10 years of his life. And I think that segues into, you have to talk about that guy, because if he did it, if he truly killed her,
right,
he spent over 10 years in prison. That's not nearly enough. He should have spent much more. But
if he would have been convicted at the time as a 15-year-old, he would only did 4 years.
Yes. If that was the max. And we know nobody ever does the max. Hardly.
So looking at that point, he served more than what he would have as a juvenile at the time that he actually...
You could make that argument. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. But what if he didn't do it?
Well, that's a whole nother layer, right?
If he didn't do it, then you would have to feel really bad for this guy.
You would.
He did lose a big chunk of his life. I mean, 10 plus years is nothing to sneeze at.
No, unless there was an arrangement. You take the fall.
For somebody else.
Or for a group of us.
And at the end of it, he had all kinds of money anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be, now we could get into conspiracy theories because there are probably, myriad number of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
I think some of them are less likely when you already have a bunch of money.
Right.
Now, if you're a poor kid and somebody says, if you take the fall for me, I'll set up your whole family and I'll put this in a bank account, then maybe.
One day you'll be set, buddy.
But I do think, if he truly didn't do it, and like I said, I have no idea. Yeah. This is one of those cases that totally baffles me. You would have to feel very sorry for this guy because not only did he spend 10 years in prison, but he carried around and he still does, the stigma of people believing that he murdered this 15-year-old girl.
Probably nobody hanging around him on the golf course.
Well, and how do you get out of it? How do you get out from under it unless somebody else is convicted? To me, that's the only way you get out of that cloud of suspicion.
He'll always be known as that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the case of the murder of Martha Moxley. Gibbs, we got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yes, hear those.
Hey, my name is Sandra. I've been listening for about a year. I don't want to say where I'm from because I want to see if you guys notice an accent because my accent is really important to me, or possibly lack thereof. I don't think I have one, but I just want you guys to see. Anyway, I've been listening for a while now, almost a year. I actually started listening because I was listening to another podcast, listened to it all the way through, was waiting for them to put out a new episode, and my mom suggested I listen to you guys, and then I totally just ignored the other podcasts, and I've been binging you guys ever since, and now I'm current on your episode, and I absolutely adore it. And I actually wanted to call because my boyfriend makes fun of me for listening to podcasts, and I was like, well, I only listen to one, because I only listen to Unsolved, or Unsolved and TCAT, and then I was like, well, I listen to two, but then I also started listening to Criminology recently. I was like, okay, well, three, but I only listen to podcasts by people named Mike, okay, and they're all about crime, so only crime and Mike, that's all I do, and I thought that was hilarious, and I thought you guys would find that funny. But yeah, absolutely love what you guys do, so keep doing it, and bye.
So, accent, Edmonton, Canada.
Really? You're going Canadian. I did not pick. I'm not good with accents within the United States, to be honest with you. Now, if you got a real heavy, Minnesota accent, okay.
Right.
I get that. But, or a real Southern drawl.
Right.
Okay, I'll get Texas, maybe Louisiana, I'm pretty good at.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm not real great at picking out where people are from based on their accent.
That's cool. I mean, she only listens to one podcast. Three podcasts.
Yeah.
But they all have mics in them.
Hey, I think that's a pretty low number because I think if you polled the audience and said, just true crime, how many true crime podcasts do you listen to? It would be in the double digits for sure on average.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I believe that.
Hey, as long as
we're in the mix.
You listen to all you want to listen to. So that's cool.
But we appreciate it very much. And tell your boyfriend that we said you're not weird.
Hey there, guys. My name is Audra, and I'm actually from a little town in Iowa. And I just wanted to tell you guys that I have just started listening to true crime all the time. But I am a long-time listener of Criminology, and I just wanted to say that I literally love you guys, and I listen to your podcast literally every day, and I had to find true crime all the time to satisfy my true crime sweet tooth, because I've listened to all of Criminology, and I want you guys to know that every night when I go to sleep, I put on an old episode of Criminology and put it really low, and I literally go to sleep with that because your voice is so relaxing. And I just want to say I love what you guys do, and you guys make my heart so happy, and I love listening to true crime. So thank you guys very much, and I hope you guys have a good night, or good day, or whenever you post this. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Appreciate the voicemail so much.
Yeah.
Another Criminology mention. The reason why I like that voicemail is because there was two things running through my mind.
Yeah.
Either her son is practicing the tuba.
Right. Or she's in a Ford Fiesta.
Or she's on a tugboat. There was one of the two.
One of the two.
Because it sounded like a tugboat or a boat horn or something.
It did. I don't know. That's Criminology. People keep bringing up.
What is that?
I'm not even on that, man.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name's Cora. I'm from Indiana, and I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you guys for keeping me entertained when I do my chores and my homework. I am a high school student, so whenever I lack motivation or just get bored, I like to turn on your podcast to keep me working. And I do have a case suggestion. I've only ever heard one other podcast cover it, which I think is kind of sad because based off of everything that happened, I do think it deserves more recognition and coverage. It's the case of April Tinsley. I think you guys should look into it. It has so many interesting twists and turns, and so many unexpected things happen. So if you have the time, I'd really appreciate it if you guys would take a look and maybe consider doing it. And again, thank you for everything that you do, and keep your own time ticking. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you very much for the voicemail.
Yeah.
So, Gibbs, I actually thought we had covered the April Tinsley case, but I don't believe we have on True Crime All the Time Unsolved. I did cover it on criminology.
Oh, wanted to bring up criminology again, did you?
For the third time.
Yeah.
But it is a good case. I mean, sad, but
Right.
it makes for a very good episode because the details are there. So we will definitely do that in the future.
I also like how she uses us for motivation to continue her studies.
Mm-hmm.
I think really a lot of teachers probably should have their kids listen, especially English teachers, and be like, this is why you want to study, kids.
But-
Listen to Gibby.
If you don't study, you'll sound like this. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
You're putting yourself down?
No, I'm just saying.
That's self-deprecating, Gibby.
Hey, easy on that self.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to use big words.
Allô, bonjour, je m'appelle Dominique. Votre podcast, c'est mon meilleur. J'aime les deux beaucoup. Hey y'all, this is Dominique. I'm just calling to tell y'all how much I love y'all's podcast. So I am both French and American. My dad's French and my mom is American. And I just listened to y'all do the Papin sisters today. So I thought that was really cool that y'all were kind of struggling with the names, because I was definitely sitting there at my desk today at work just saying the names in like the French way. So I thought that was really cool. Y'all are definitely my favorite podcast ever, and y'all keep doing what you're doing. I love y'all very much, and keep your own time ticking.
Ah, oui, oui.
Oui, oui.
Oui, oui.
The only thing I understood was buku. That's the only boku or whatever it is.
Beaucoup varivant.
Dude, don't try to speak French. Come on now. But anyway, that was our first voicemail in French.
Yeah, that was cool.
And when I first started listening to it, I thought, okay, this whole thing's going to be in French. I'm not going to be able to play it because nobody's going to understand it.
And then you're like-
I didn't take French. I took Spanish. So I'm much more fluent. I'm not fluent, but I'm better in Spanish. I know no French whatsoever.
Me neither.
Except for oui and
Oui? Yeah.
parlez-vous français.
It's because it's in a song.
Yeah. Most of the things I know are probably from songs.
Yeah.
Gibbs, that's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved, episode 150.
We did it.
We did it.
We did it.
And I hope we have 150 more.
And more than that.
And if people keep listening, we will.
Yeah.
So for Mike
And Gibby.
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.